What should my kid pack for college?
I don't know.
How much spending money?
I don't know.
What should we talk about?
I don't know.
So how can I be sure that my kid is keeping up with his classwork?
I don't know. What are we going to do if there are no in-person classes? I don't know.
College Ready 2020. A crash course preparing college parents for the road ahead. Hello, I'm Andrea McCarren, your host for College Ready 2020. You've worked hard to raise your child, educate them, and help them get into college. And now you are in the final stages of preparation and getting ready for drop-off day. Drop-off day will be emotionally charged for both your student and you, especially for parents of incoming freshmen. There is no way to avoid it, but you can prepare. To help us anticipate what you'll be going through during the last couple of days before drop-off day itself, we spoke with Ben Williams.
My name is Ben Williams.
He's the Assistant Director of New Student Orientation and Parent and Family Engagement at Georgia State University.
I oversee orientation, parent and family engagement, and off-campus housing.
And Angelica McLean.
Angelica McLean.
Assistant Director for Parent and Family Programs at Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis, also known as IUPUI.
I currently serve helping students as well as parents and our families, supporting them throughout their process, as well as providing programming on campus, helping students of first generation parents, along with 21st century scholars, all facets of a parent or a family member and what they need support in.
We began by asking our guests about what parents should do during the 48 hours prior to drop-off day for their incoming freshmen.
Is wine an answer? I'm kidding. Whether your student is going to be living on campus in a residence hall or off campus in an apartment near campus, one of the most important things that parent and family members can do to kind of prepare is to have some sort of celebration of the new event, whether that is going out to dinner after the students moved in, or it's doing, one last family dinner at home. That's the primary thing I share, because one of the things that I try to encourage in all of my work is to really help them start that transition, because this is a moment that is going to be challenging and exciting, and there's going to be happy tears and sad tears. There might be some arguments. All of those things come together around the concept of moving in, because while they are physically moving into a new apartment or on-campus housing, even if they're staying at home, they're actually having that transition of sorts, because they're still having that transition to, I'm not just living at my parents' house anymore. I'm a college student. I'm doing these other things. And so I think having some sort of ceremonial or symbolic kind of closing and celebration of what's ahead is super important. I also think having very specific conversations about what the expectations are for both the student and for the parent and family member. I will never forget, last fall, I had a parent call me frantically at 9 a.m. because they could not get in touch with their student. They were convinced something really terrible had happened. I myself wasn't necessarily convinced of that, but they were. And so in doing the check on the student's well-being, honestly, what we found is that they'd been up since 4 a.m. the night before, and so they were just sleeping in. And their parent and them had different understandings of what that communication and the response to communication should look like. So I think setting expectations along with celebrating the transition are two key things that can happen the 48 hours before and both earlier and later in the process.
When I give a presentation to families or incoming families, and usually that is during orientation, I really do talk about those expectations and setting those from the beginning. Your student's not a mind reader, and you as a parent or a family member are also not a mind reader. And so I think having those expectations, whether they are living on campus or whether they are living at home. There are some students, who do live at home, and what are those expectations? Having those expectations and setting those with each other is a great conversation to have. If you haven't been having them, at least in the summer, then definitely have those in those 48 hours.
You've likely been having conversations about a number of school-related topics leading up to this time, and the last couple of days are the time to make sure expectations are properly set. It could be about money, academics, or even frequency of communication. It's time for one more heart-to-heart conversation.
I think communication is a really big thing, especially with this generation or Gen Z. Having that communication, and what does that look like? Am I going to send you as a student, am I sending you a text every morning? Or am I doing check-ins on a weekly basis? What does that really look like? I think communication is so big. I think that some of these expectations and some of these even like relationships that you're building with your student at this point is going to probably last forever. And so even talking about grades, what does that look like? I do present quite a bit on having those grades conversation. Do I expect you as a student to have this GPA? Or, hey, I don't really think that getting an on-campus job is something that you should do your first semester. Maybe you should wait. Or maybe getting involved in a fraternity or sorority or Greek life. If that's something you wanted to do, well, let's have that conversation too. You should also, as a parent and as a family member, even allow your student to kind of find their way and create their own journey. But they are definitely going to use the parent or the family member as their check-in point and their base. So I think that that's really important to have that conversation with them beforehand.
It's probably similarly about the things that we think about transition-wise. So communication, I think, is a huge one because, where college students are developmentally is that they're trying to make sense of this big major change. Oftentimes, that doesn't necessarily include what communication or those things to a parent and family member look like because they've never had to have in the same way such an intentional commitment to communicating. I think that 2-week window before classes start, it's just a powder keg of emotion for both the students who are ready to be in college and ready to be living that experience, and for the parent and family members who, even if they are ready for the students to do that, they're not ready or fully understand the big changes that are about to happen, especially if this is their first student going off to college.
When a student goes off to college, one of the biggest transitions for a parent is adjusting to a new frequency of communication. Are your kids expected to respond to your every text in a timely way? Are they going to call you at least once a week? This is a subject that you certainly need to speak about ahead of time.
For Gen Z, the generation that is coming up for our students, the frequency piece of communication, what does that look like? It could be in the form, Snapchat and Instagram, TikTok might be that form of communication for a certain family or for a certain student. And, what does that look like? But I think having that talk with your student and asking, hey, I want you guys to call me every Sunday, maybe we'll talk. We had a parent who provided their story, and they said that the expectation that she had was that her son actually called every single Sunday. And it wasn't necessarily just to talk to the parent or that mom, but it was to talk to his little brother and to tell him about his experience, his highs and lows, because they had never gone to college. The parents, that he came from a first generation family. And so it was really important to that family, and specifically that mom, that her son had that conversation with his brother, because that was something that he wanted to learn. And she wanted him to understand that this is an expectation that you are going to college. I think that that's really important for any family member to have that conversation sometime during the summer.
Although drop-off day is most difficult for incoming freshmen, preparing for drop-off can still be challenging when your student is a sophomore, junior, or senior.
Let's say for sophomores, they've been around the block, I guess, or been around the college campus. Some important things that you can re-highlight with your student, or if they're a sophomore or even a junior or senior, is just enjoying the time that they have. Because I will say that college goes by, those 4 years go by really, really quickly. But I think having that conversation, let's say with your sophomore, that maybe they didn't have an on-campus job this past year and maybe they want to have a job this year, having that conversation and that time management piece, what does that look like? My hopes is that you had been talking about that all summer, but if your student decided the 48 hours before you're dropping them off back to campus that I think I want to take up a on-campus job. Okay, well, what does that look like? Is that something that your student can handle? Asking those probing questions is really important with your student, and making sure, specifically with an on-campus job or any other huge activity that they're going to take part in, whether that's having a leadership role in a student organization or in Greek life or whatever facet that looks like, having that conversation about time management and if they really can handle that with their course load as well as the extracurricular activities that they're wanting to do. So I think for seniors, this is your last year in college, and just ensuring that you understand what's your next step. Because after senior year, the next step is to get a job. Or for me, I moved back home and I ended up going to grad school the following year. So really trying to figure out what your next step is and that you are about to become a career person. You're about to go into the big world. I think seniors or even juniors will discuss that and figure out what is their big next step, I think, for that junior and senior year.
When you're dropping someone off in a concurrent year after their first year, it's easier because you've done it before. I think it's also more challenging because you're getting ever closer to graduation, which is another huge transition in the relationship between a student and their supporters, their parent and family member in this process. So I think it in a lot of ways is easier, but I think it also then plays into the reality that that date of them graduating and being a full adult is ever closer.
So you've celebrated, you've gone shopping, you've had those last-minute tough conversations, and finally you've arrived at drop-off day. Your student is excited, anxious, and perhaps a bit short with you. You may have butterflies in your stomach, and you desperately want to make this experience as meaningful as possible. With this in mind, we asked our guests to tell us about some of the biggest mistakes that families make on drop-off day.
The biggest mistakes that people make are really just not preparing themselves, both emotionally and practically, for what that looks like. So I'll start with the emotional part first. Fundamentally, what I think the biggest mistakes that are made when drop-off occurs is that parents and family members and their students haven't prepared emotionally or practically for what that transition will look like. So, for instance, when I think about the emotional piece, there is this really great video that our public relations marketing and communications team has created about move-in for students that shows parent and family members getting emotional, saying goodbye to their student, talking about the transition, all of those kind of things. And so I proactively send that message and that video out to all of our parent and family members with an encouragement for them to prepare themselves for both the exciting and the sad emotions that they're going to experience during move-in. Because while all the things that Angelica and I have talked to about this point about preparing parents and their students, being proactive, communicating at orientation, etc., all of it really culminates in this one moment because the parents and family members are quite literally driving, flying, whatever they're doing, taking this person that they've been responsible for stewarding for however many years of their life, and then driving away back to a house or an apartment that has that room or that space that was dedicated for that student, and they're no longer there. They may only be 10, 15 minutes down the road, or they might be a 20-hour flight. And so really making sure to prepare for the emotional aspects of it. What are the things that you know about yourself as an individual that are going to be triggering for you in that moment? And how can you prepare yourself so that you have a positive experience moving your student in, but also so that there aren't some underlying factors that then are impacting your student's move-in experience, because no one wants to take something away from that moment. And so I think preparing emotionally for that is huge.
I used to work in housing and residence life. I used to be a resident assistant, so an RA. And when I would see parents who were doing these things, I just would slow clap for them because I thought that that was amazing. So letting your student steer the ship, letting your student take the lead. Whenever I see family members do this, I just want to cheer for them because I think that that is really important. I think that your student is going to be on campus and they are not going to have you there past that day or maybe that weekend. Allowing your student to introduce themselves to staff, to ask the staff questions if they have questions, letting your student tell you what they need and not the other way around. That autonomy piece and that also communication piece is extremely important. The other piece that I was thinking was asking questions. So having that parent or that family member, I see when they ask the student questions, or maybe they are asking the staff member those questions, but also listening to the information that is given before jumping off and saying, well, I need this and this and this. Definitely asking questions, but then also listening is extremely important. I know that us as staff are giving you and your student a lot of information to process. I totally understand that, but we're giving you information that is extremely important and is imperative for the next steps, right? So if they're moving into their residence hall, well, there's next steps. There's important information that they need to understand. Maybe they're taking a tour on campus. Well, classes are going to be here. This is where you're going to get something to eat. Here's where you can go and study. So I think that that's really important. The last piece is the positivity piece. Your student is going through a whirlwind of emotions. They are excited. They are nervous. Maybe they are scared even because they are going to be on their own and maybe they haven't quite made friends, or maybe they are living on campus with a roommate that they don't know. And that in itself is scary, right? And so I think being a support system for your student during this time, being positive as well. Positivity is infectious. And so I think if your student is feeling these whirlwind of emotions and you saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. And, it's okay if we don't know. Some of these things are unknown. That's okay, right? And we're going to figure it out. So those are my 3 things that I have seen some family members and parents be rock stars at. And again, I will slow clap for them. I will be their cheerleader all the time when I see them interact with their student this way, because I think that they're setting their student up for success.
It doesn't matter whether your student is an incoming freshman or a graduating senior, and it doesn't matter whether they'll be taking classes from their bedroom at home or you'll be driving them hundreds of miles away. Before classes begin this year, you need to speak to your student about money.
It is hard for parents to talk to their kids about personal finance, but you have to do it. It is critical.
That's Jamie Gayton, Executive Vice President of the Pentagon Federal Credit Union, PenFed, who served for 30 years in the U.S. Army after graduating from West Point. He's the author of the Guide to Personal Financial Planning for the Armed Forces and has taught financial literacy courses for the cadets at West Point, family readiness groups throughout the Army, and a variety of other groups and community organizations. Jamie is also the father of 2 teenagers and a young adult. For this edition of College Ready Money Moments, Jamie speaks to us about the challenges your student might face trying to stay on budget and what to do about it.
Sticking to the budget is hard. I believe that most people overestimate how much money they expect to come in and they underestimate how much they plan to spend. And because of that, there's always going to be a bit of a rub. So I think the key conversation that has to be had is, hey, we've identified what we expect the expenses to be and what the expected income to be. If you plan to not be able to meet that, you need to identify any major expenses and let us know ahead of time so we can discuss what's appropriate and how we should go about paying for those. Nobody wants to be surprised. Parents do not want to be surprised by an unexpected expense, and children do not want to feel like they're not being supported with what they want. The key is communication. The earlier you talk about that, the better off everyone's going to be. Enforcement. So you got choices there as parents. Do I choose to let them put it on a credit card bill and allow them to pay some interest on that as a mechanism to teach them how much it's going to cost if you don't plan and budget appropriately? If you choose to bail them out, on the other hand, what it signals to the child is, hey, my parents will always bail me out, and so I might as well just overspend my budget. So you have to balance, and this is a tough love thing, you have to balance how much you want to support them and how much you want to hold them to the standard. The key, I think, is making sure it's transparent up front by saying ahead of time, if you plan to exceed your budget, you need to talk to us ahead of time so that we can make a joint family decision on how that should happen.
PenFed Credit Union serves over 2 million members worldwide, offering market-leading certificates, checking, credit cards, personal loans, mortgages, auto loans, and student loans, with members' interests always in mind. For more information concerning the personal financial challenges faced by college students, please visit PenFed at penfed.org.
So to help things go as smoothly as possible on drop-off day, let your student take the lead. College is their new home, not yours. Let them take ownership of this big day at the beginning of their adult life. But be prepared, even if you are completely supportive, tensions can still rise.
In the 6-7 years of me working in higher education, I definitely have seen those squabbles, those arguments, those kind of, I would say, embarrassing moments. I think for both the student and the family member, I've definitely seen those. And I think that they're going to come. I think they're natural. If the parent and the family member and the student would have had those conversations from the very beginning or beforehand, the squabbles and those embarrassment moments would not